the inflation figures are out now. Let's quickly bring you up to speed with the details that have come in at the moment. Inflation has eased in July as was expected. The government had already indicated this is now at 6.7%, down from 7.01% in June. Still above the 6% mark that the government has been trying to target. However, certainly some easing of inflation there in the month of July, down from 7.01% in June by almost 0.4% there to 6.7% now. Retail inflation is the lowest right now in the last 5 months. Certainly this will come as some relief, especially for the government that is constantly looking at how to maneuver within the economic situation and state that the world is in at the moment, with this retail inflation coming out to be the lowest in the last 5 months at 6.7% in the month of June, down from in July, down from the month of June when it was 7.1%. Now, largely the government would ideally want the inflation to be even further down and under control to about 6%, but even the signs that are coming in now, in June it was 7.01%, I'm sorry, not 7.1%, and it's down now to 6.7% in the month of July. Let me go across to Priyanshi for more details on this. Priyanshi, certainly something that the government would now look at as a sign of relief there, is it?
Absolutely, Maha. Inflation rate has come down to 6.71%, and it's in fact the lowest inflation rate that we've seen since the month of March. The last time inflation was around this figure was in the month of March when it stood at 6.95%, but now it's come down to 6.7%, and if we compare it to the figure last month, it was 7.01% as you mentioned, and now it has come down to 6.7% in the month of July. But, and that's a big but here, it still remains above RBI's threshold of 6%. Remember, the Reserve Bank of India has a threshold, has a target of maintaining inflation below 6%, but throughout this year, inflation has remained above that target, and even though it has come down in the month of July, it's still above that 6% threshold. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India has repeatedly said that inflation will remain above this target for the entire year. So that's still a concern. It's still not a comfortable situation. It sure has come down, but the comfortable situation would be when inflation is actually below 6%. Now, if we tell you why the rate has really gone down, when crude oil prices are falling, the global crude oil prices are falling, and since we import more than 80% of the fuel we consume, when crude oil prices go down, our inflation also goes down. As we saw ever since the war started, crude oil prices had started soaring from around $95 per barrel. They went up to $120 per barrel, $130 per barrel, and since fuel prices really trickle down into inflation for food products as well, since all products need fuel to be transported. So that is why the rising fuel prices because of the war were leading to inflation in India, inflation ranging from food products to fuel to clothing, etc. But now that those fuel prices are coming down, that's the major reason that's taking down the inflation figure now. In fact, crude oil prices have gone down by close to 9% in just about a month, and they've been less than $100 per barrel for the last 1 week. Now, if we tell you the rural-urban divide in the inflation figures that have come out, the urban inflation currently stands at 6.49%, while rural inflation stands at 6.8%. So we're still seeing that even in this case, rural India is being impacted more than urban India. The inflation rate, even in the month of June, was higher for rural India as compared to urban India, and that's the trend that we're still seeing is continuing. The month before that, in the month of May, in fact, urban inflation was actually higher than rural inflation. But for the last 2 months, we're seeing that rural inflation is higher, meaning that the impact of higher prices is being felt more on the rural population of the country. And if we also tell you which category categories have the highest inflation? It's the obvious suspects. Fuel inflation is the highest. Fuel is contributing the highest to the overall inflation figure of 6.71%, and the food inflation is currently at 6.75%, which is slightly higher than the overall inflation figure. So definitely inflation has come down, but not a comfortable situation, as it still remains above 6%.
So Priyanshi, if you are pointing out that food inflation continues to remain high, really for the common man there's very little relief there, isn't it then?
Right, Maha, and even though inflation has come down according to these figures that we were just talking about, the impact on the common man goes beyond this, because this 6% does not reflect the increase in the budget of a common man. Their budgets have gone up even higher. Even last month, we spoke to some families whose budgets had gone up by 50%, by 60% in just the last 6 months or so, because their basket of goods, the goods that they buy, their prices have gone up, which of course includes more of food, more of clothing, products that people use for their basic essentials, for their everyday use. So those products, the prices of those have really gone up, and that's why the impact on the common person is much more than this 6% figure that we're seeing. And in fact, if we go through the categories with the highest inflation is seen in fuel and light. The inflation rate for this category is currently at 11.76%. At the second position is clothing and footwear at 9.91%. After that, it's food and beverages at 6.71%. After that, it's housing at 3.90%. So really, we're seeing roti, kapra and makan, all of that getting more expensive. The inflation figure for fuel is actually really shocking at above 11%. So even though that really shows us how the inflation impact comes on the common people, that even though the overall inflation figure is just 6%, it's, I beg your pardon, it's not just, it's still really high. Even though that figure is 6%, the inflation figure for fuel and light, the basic commodity that all of us use, that inflation figure is 11%. The inflation for food and beverages is also 6.71%. Clothing and footwear is 9.91%. So these figures are actually above that overall inflation figure that we're seeing at 6.71%, meaning that the common families that buy more of these products in their household budgets face an even higher burden of inflation, more than this 6.71% figure that we're seeing. And if we go across the trend that's going on globally as well, it's not just India that's witnessing a fall in inflation. Even the United States saw easing of inflation in the month of July, and their inflation also eased to 8.5% from their 4-decade high, and that's similar to what we're seeing in India as well, all on the back of lowering commodity prices, lowering crude oil prices. In fact, not just crude, but when we talk of other commodities, the food prices also are lowering across the globe. And why is that happening? Because now there's a concern of recession and lowering demand. With economies shrinking across the globe, even the United States, that economy, the biggest economy in the world, shrank for the second straight quarter. So because of these signs, the global economy is now fearing that there might just not be enough demand. And as the basic rule of economics goes, that when there's lower demand, prices naturally go down. So because of that, that's the reason why we're seeing global commodity prices and oil prices going down. The recession fears and the demand concerns really dragging these prices down. But of course, this comes as a positive trend, at least a start of a positive trend for the inflation trajectory for India. It's a come down to 6.71%, but definitely above RBI's target still.
But Priyanshi, since you're mentioning that the crude oil prices are coming down now, and they're already at the moment at prices pre the Ukraine war, can we see further easing of inflation in the coming months? What is the government projecting?
Maha, that is what we would expect as well. Even the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman spoke in the Parliament recently on this inflation issue, and she said that countries across the globe are really facing inflation, and it's not just India. And it's on the back of higher fuel prices, as you were also pointing out. And as you said, that those prices are coming down. They've come down to, in fact, the levels that we saw before the Ukraine war. Right before the war started in Ukraine, crude oil prices were around $96 per barrel, $95 per barrel. But now after the war, they went up to 120, 130. But now they're back to those levels, as I mentioned, back to those levels of $98, $99 per barrel. And that's why inflation is going down. So to answer your question, it can be expected. That's what experts are polling as well, that inflation is likely to go down. And the Reserve Bank of India also, in its monetary policy that was recently released, they also said that inflation is likely to go down now because the supply constraints are likely to ease. Even though they're still concerning, the concern in no way is over. The inflation concern, the supply disruptions, the concerns starting from the war, none of those concerns are over, but this is only to say that they're better than what they were, let's say, a couple of months ago. Let's say when how they were in the month of April, May, June, that were just the months right after the war hit us. They're better than that, but we're still not in a comfortable position. As I said, it's still above the Reserve Bank's target. The Reserve Bank is, the central bank had asked the Reserve Bank, and the Reserve Bank under its monetary policy framework is required to maintain inflation in the bracket of 2 to 6%. So we're still really high compared to that at 6.7%. And the target, the comfortable level is really 2 to 6%, and that's still a far-fetched dream. In fact, this year we can't expect the inflation rate to come back to those figures, to come below 6%. It's still likely to be above 6% till December.
All right.